Hello everybody, this is some random Neko, waking up from her nap to greet the world for the day. And by greet, I mean cleanse my palate of dark fantasy fairy tales by switching over to fun fantasy fairy tales with Red Shoes and the Seven Dwarfs, the next Snow White adaptation to be put under the microscope and an animated one instead of live action this time to spice things up a bit. The Fearless Seven, a group of vain but heroic princes, are turned into green dwarfs by a spurned fairy princess. Their only hope to break the curse is a kiss from the most beautiful woman in the world. Meanwhile, Snow White is on a quest to find her missing father, King White, who disappeared at the hands of her wicked stepmother, Regina. After stumbling upon a pair of magic red shoes that change her appearance, she crosses paths with the Fearless Seven, who pledge to help her in the hopes of receiving her kiss to break their curse. Right off the bat, Red Shoes and the Seven Dwarfs is a fun animated film for kids with a story that takes a lot of inspiration from other fairy tale films that subvert the tales they're based on. In this case, the story is heavily inspired by Shrek, with the relationship formed between two people whose appearances are polar opposites of each other, and the message of self-acceptance and challenging social expectations while finding true love by not judging a book by its cover. There are also influences from Tangled that we can see through the relationship of our main duo and in how the film ends. Speaking of our main duo, I like how the film spends a good amount of time building the relationship between Snow White and her Prince Charming, or in this case, Red Shoes and Merlin. I enjoy the relationship that is formed between them and how, by encountering Snow White as Red Shoes, Merlin is the first of the Seven Dwarfs to really start to reflect on and grow past his shallow way of thinking. Both of these characters feel as if they're inspired by Shrek and Tangled, with Snow White feeling like a combination of Shrek and Fiona, while Merlin is a more shallow version of Flynn Rider. But they're still different enough with interesting relationship development and character growth, at least on Merlin's side, that you don't immediately compare and contrast until after the film's over and you've had some time to think back on it. I also appreciate how we spend more time with the dwarfs and get to know who they are as individuals, though they do kinda cheat with having three of them be triplets. They're all distinct from each other, not just in their appearances and personalities, but also with their voices. It was certainly a choice to give them all different European accents, and I find it hilarious how committed each dwarf is to their specific method of wooing Red Shoes, but it's only Merlin who manages to succeed because he actually tries different ways to get her affection. Also, I want to give a quick little shout out to the evil stepmother and Prince Average, or
Abu Raj,
who are absolute cartoon villains, and that is totally okay, because not every villain needs a tragic backstory or to have an understandable reason as to why they're the bad guys. And side note, Patrick Warburton voices the Magic Mirror, who is such a character, and I absolutely would not have minded if he got more screen time than he actually did. Plus, the mirror does a good job of explaining the magic system that's centered around the apple, which is a fascinating element in the story. I appreciate the thought that was put into the magic of the apple, with the rules it follows, how Regina uses it to work her magic, and how it's considered
the most suspicious of fruits,
which is a fun little running joke. The animation for Red Shoes and the Seven Dwarfs is great. It's clean and smooth with no odd cuts or jumps or lags to be seen. The character designs are nice as well, but they were a little too nice as everyone looked cute or attractive or nice no matter what, which kind of lessened the point the film was trying to make about true beauty coming from within, as even Regina still looked good for her age despite the fact that she's supposed to be an old hag. At the very least, the action scenes are amazing, and I love how creative they are due to the curse the dwarves are under, which leads to some creative sequences for fights, as well as making for some funny slapstick and visual comedy. The comedy in general feels as if it's mainly targeted towards kids, as a lot of the jokes and gags were not funny in my opinion, though I will admit I chuckled at the visual and slapstick comedy, as it's more in line with my sense of humor. And the soundtrack is just okay. It's mainly good or catchy pop songs about self-acceptance and romantic love and such, meant to fit the story it's telling, so it's not anything that's really special or unique. Now, as much as I wanted to enjoy Red Shoes and the Seven Dwarfs more than I did, I really couldn't. While the film is fun and its message is one that's still important enough to need to be conveyed even today, the execution of its plot is unfortunately somewhat shallow due to its bad pacing and the imbalanced focus it places on certain elements of the story. The film spends a lot of time building up and establishing the groundwork for the message they're trying to convey, and when they're finally done, the pace picks up way too fast because we're already near the end of the film by the time the point is being made. For example, they spend way too much time showing how shallow the dwarfs are. Over 30 minutes, in fact. Like, we get it. They're narcissistic and shallow and avoid self-reflection, only focusing on how to woo beautiful women for their own gratification and validation. We didn't need to spend so much time showing this because it's already shown to us in the opening scene that explains how they got cursed in the first place. The dwarves' attempts to flirt with and woo Snow White also got real annoying and real old real fast. especially with how their attempts quickly began to reek of desperation. But at least it was toned down to a simmer, then turned off completely once the film began to focus on the relationship between Snow White and Merlin. Though I wish this began sooner because, again, it took over 30 minutes before we actually got to see the start of something new growing between them. The film also doesn't do enough with the message they're trying to convey, as its execution in the story is rather shallow. They only ever discuss the issues of beauty outside and within in the context of the relationship between Snow White and Merlin. They don't give either character a chance to focus on their own thoughts about how that shallow thinking affects them, or reflect on how it influences their interactions with the world, or how they were led to think the way they do. Nor do any other characters outside of the main duo have their own thoughts about the subject either. We do at least see how societal expectations of beauty affect the way people interact with Snow White as opposed to Red Shoes, but it's still not enough. For example, in Shrek, there are other characters who voice their thoughts about Shrek and Fiona's relationship, and the film isn't afraid to show how society views them as individuals and how that affects their actions. In Tangled, Eugene bears his heart out to Rapunzel and tells her the story of why he became Flynn Rider to begin with. But in Red Shoes, there's not much to drive home the point they're making, except for 2 conversations between Merlin and Snow White, which don't work as well as the film would like it to because 1, it happens after we're almost an hour into a 93-minute film, and 2, we've already spent too much time focusing on the dwarves and not enough on Snow White and Merlin's relationship, with barely any focus spent on who these 2 are as individuals. Overall, Red Shoes and the Seven Dwarfs gets a C+B-. While it's a fun and well-animated film, it feels like it was made for kids rather than for the whole family. It takes a lot of inspiration from other films, mainly Shrek and Tangled, and while unique enough to stand on its own, you won't be able to stop yourself from making comparisons by the end. Still, while it does take a while to drive home the point it's making, it's still an important point to be made regardless. Everyone, not just kids, needs the reminder that true beauty is not skin deep, that true beauty comes from within, and that true love comes from accepting yourself as you are, regardless of society's expectations for what you should look like and how you should act. Because you could be the most conventionally attractive person in the world and still be considered ugly because of a terrible personality. It's just a shame that there weren't more people who watched this film, or are even aware of its existence, due to the unfortunate PR it had before its release, as it made everyone believe the film was going to body shame when it really doesn't. Anyways, if you ever want to watch an animated Snow White adaptation that's fun, well animated, and with the important message that true beauty does indeed come from within, Red Shoes and the Seven Dwarfs is the film for you. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Reminder that this is just my opinion, so you can take it with as many grains of salt as you want. I don't mind either way, and would love to know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Please feel free to like, subscribe, and comment which film you'd like me to give my 2 cents about next. Heads up though, I'm going to do one more review of a Snow White adaptation, which was actually recommended to me by a comment on a previous video, before finally moving on to something else. Anyways, this is some random Neko, going off to take a nap now. Don't forget to keep calm and just meow.